just like before. I'm going to only really talk if someone says something, if someone talks to me. I'll answer any questions that you have, unless it's like too blatant answer givey, stuff like that. Um, Other than that, I'm just going to be narrating all of the parts that are not spoken. Without further ado, let's get into it. Okay? You guys enjoy? We've docked at the harbor. The boat driver came out and jumped out to the pier with a mooring rope. A large man with a tuxedo was waiting there for us with a warm smile. I didn't recognize his face, but judging by his clothes, I guess he was a servant of the Ushimiya head household.
お嬢様、お帰りなさいませ。だいぶ遅かったので心配しておりました。
心配ありがとう。ウドの大木が怖がっちゃってよ。それで徐行運転だったってわけ。マジでうぜえぜ。
うるせえ。いつか逆の立場になったら覚えてろ。
At this rate, word will spread to the whole family, and I'll be the big conversation piece. Even without this, everyone will be talking about me because of that 6-year gap. Now I've given them an even juicier topic. Damn it, why does the Ishimiya head family have to live on this isolated island? In the meantime, the boat had finished its mooring. A small plank was lowered so that we could get down. One by one, our parents came up from inside the boat.
皆様、長旅お疲れ様。奥様、お手をどうぞ。
ありがとう。お久しぶりね。ゴーダさんもお元気？
ありがとうございます。おかげさまで毎日元気にお勤めをさせていただいております。
バトラ君はゴーダさんとは初対面じゃない？確か6年前はお勤めじゃなかったですよね。
はい。ですので、バトラ様とは初めてご挨拶させていただきます。はじめまして、バトラ様。
俺もタッパには多少の自信があったんだが、紛れもなく初対面だぜ。こんな大男あったら絶対忘れないさ。どうも、はじめまして。バトラス。
お待ち申し上げておりました。一昨年から後宮本家にお仕えさせていただいております使用人のゴーダと申します。どうぞよろしくお願いいたします。何かご用命がございましたらいつでもお申し付けください。
ゴーダさん、お久しぶりです。
ジョージ様、ご無沙汰をいたしております。お手をどうぞ。
あんた相変わらず大した接客のプロや。もし食に困ったらいつでもわしに声をかけるんやで。いつでも雇ったろ。
これは身に余る光栄です。どうぞお手を、秀吉様。
Oda-san lent them a hand to everyone as they embarked, greeting them as they passed. Speech and mannerisms have a fine polish of professionalism. He was very graceful, in contrast with his initially tough-looking appearance. His large size made him seem a bit scary at first, but he was much more polite than first impressions had led me to believe. And have served on the island for 2 years, but he had doubtless worked at similar jobs somewhere else before. After everyone disembarked, the mooring rope was untied and the boat started to steer away from the harbor. It was probably returning to its home port on Nijima. The captain waved its hand and ended farewell. Maria waved back her hand.
なんだかさっきから違和感があると思ったら、海猫の声を聞いてないぜ。
海猫？鳥のか？
Remember correctly, whenever we came to this island in the past, the seagulls already grazed with their lively nya nya cries. It was Because of that, whenever I hear the cries of the seagulls anywhere else, I got the feeling that I'm coming home for a family conference. Except for the small part of the island where those of the Urshima head family live, Rokujima has been left uncultivated. Makes it apparently a paradise for wild birds. Supposedly, there was a cliff somewhere that housed a huge seagull colony, so this island was always full of seagulls. Not having those seagulls here to greet me made me feel a bit lonely.
どうしたのバトラ君。
ああ、ローザおばさん。いや、別に。海猫の声が聞こえないんで、なんか寂しいなーって。
あら、そういえばそうね。いっつも賑やかなのに、今日はさっぱりいないわね。
どうして海猫いない？
海猫たちも今日はよそで集まりがあるからかな。マリアも海猫見たかったの？
見たかった。
なんだってこうもまるっきりいねえんだ。ジェシカがみんな焼き鳥にして食っちまったんかな。
物騒なこと言うんじゃねえ。マリアが勘違いするだろ。ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたしてない。そんなの私がするわけねえだろ。
そうだそうだ、ジェシカが焼き鳥にしたんだ。皮につくねにレバーにネギマン、
皮にくつねり、レバーにネギマン。
I made fun of Jessica. Maria tagged along, looking like she was having fun. I never guessed she was such a good support. Alrighty then. From then on, I'll make you my #1 follower. As I smiled, she beamed, overjoyed, possibly because she was happy about this little connection we had made with each other.
違うよ、マリアちゃん。野鳥って天気や気圧の変化に敏感なんだそうだよ。今夜あたり天気が崩れそうだしね。巣へ早めに引き上げてるのかもしれないね。
焼き鳥じゃない？ジェシカお姉ちゃんが焼き鳥にしたんじゃない？違う。私はそんなことしないって。ほら、バトラも嘘だったって認めろよ。
バトラ君、マリアちゃんは素直な子だから、そういう冗談でも真に受けちゃうんだよ。冗談も少し選んだ方がいいよ。
George Aniki Even though I outstripped Aniki in height, Aniki was Aniki. There was no choice but to obediently apologize.
おう。悪い悪い。マリア、今のは冗談だ。海猫たちは今日は巣でおとなしくしてるってさ。
バトラは嘘？ジョージお兄ちゃんは本当？
Had she actually been tricked despite all the fun she was having? Her pure eyes made me feel guilty. I went a little overboard with her after all.
ああ、そうだそうだ。ジョージ兄貴が言ったのが本当だ。天気が悪いんで今日は引き上げたんだろうよ。いなくなったわけじゃないんだぜ。ね、おばさん。
そうよ。明日以降天気が良くなったらきっと戻ってきてミャーミャーと声を聞かせてくれるわ。
天気良くなって戻ってくるの待つ。明日まで待つ。天気良くなるまで待つ。
Maria was in a lighter mood and was looking forward to tomorrow, when the seagulls would come back to the filled sky. Still, George Aniki was really amazing at taking care of kids. I think I remember Aniki taking good care of me as well whenever I was a brat 6 years ago. Aniki, that's probably your gift.
ジョージ君は小さい子の面倒を見るのがうまいわね。保育士さんでも務められるんじゃない？
なあ、ジョージ兄さんの転職っぽいぜ。 私的には社長室でビジネスってより、そっちの方が兄さんのイメージだぜ。
まさか、保育士さんは立派なお仕事だよ。単なる子供好き程度に務まる仕事じゃないね。
本当にジョージ君は謙虚ね。でも、バトラ君も子供のあやし方が上手よ。さっきはほんの少しの間だけど、マリアとっても楽しそうだった。これからも今みたいに遊んであげてね。冗談は選んで。だ
Aunt Rosa winked at me, giggling a little. She's a real mother, I thought to myself, who's happy to see Maria having fun.
おいローザ、それにガキどもも何やってんだ。行くぞ。
はいはい、今行きます。
The old bastard was waving for us to hurry up. Yeah, we need to get moving. Might as well have this conversation after setting our luggage down in our rooms.
それでは皆様、お泊まりのゲストハウスの方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
Goda-san called to everyone and led the route way. Kumasawa-san brought up from the rear. Serpentine twisting path led through a dim forest. They ran a bit uphill. I guess the path was made all twisty, so the slope wouldn't seem too steep. Personally, I'd been a lot happier if they just had the guts to make some stairs in a straight line. No doubt that they made the path twist on purpose, to put on airs of distance and importance. Before long, we saw a garden-style stone steps. Ah, from here on I do have some memories. Go up these, and top of the stone steps, we saw a beautiful guest house. Its facade was lovely, of course, but more importantly, you couldn't enter its doors without having your heart stolen away by the splendor of the beautiful rose gardens before it.
はあ、今年も相変わらず大したもんや。目の保養とはこのことやで。
After climbing the stone steps, people greeted the rose garden, gave their voice to the impression one by one.
今年は少し花に元気がないんじゃない？やっぱり夏があまり暑くなかったせいかしら。
そのせいもあるかと思います。去年の先に比べると、今年は少々見劣るのが残念です。
Even so, it was a delightful rose garden. I remember that even 6 years ago, huge numbers of roses had greeted us every year. This rose garden was the first thing that greeted people in Rokujima. Even our parents, who came every year, couldn't help but give voice to their admiration. In fact, it seems to have undergone a power-up from the garden of my memories from 6 years ago.
いつ見てもすごいわね。自宅にこれだけのバラ園があったら、さぞや素敵でしょうに。
よせよ、誰が。バラは虫とか病気とか大変なんだぜ。
そうね。キリエ姉さんは毎日バラの手入れをしてて虫がつかないようにしてるそうよ。
え？そうなのかよ。そんな話は知らないぜ。
そうなんです。この人の場合はバラの方から虫を求めていっちゃうから、どっちかというとたちの悪い食虫植物ってところね。
ああ、そういう話かよ。たく。ローザ、今日はそういう話は勘弁してくれよ。もうそういうのはすっかり足を洗ったんだぜ。
どうかしら。ルドルフ兄さんは遺伝子的レベルでだらしないですし。
大丈夫よローザさん。あんまりおいたするバラなら根元からちょんって切っちゃうから。
物騒なお話。
モテる男はいつもリスクと隣り合わせなんや。わしも来世じゃもうちょい美形に生まれたいもんやで。
だから秀吉兄さん、モテてなんかないって。キリエも物騒な話なんかやめろい。俺のバラがしおれちまったじゃねえか。
ほら、マリアちゃん、来てごらん。こっちのバラは特に立派だよ。
バラが立
かぐわしい匂いだぜ。俺のエレガントさにぴったりだな。
おい、よせよ。マリアが真似してトゲで怪我するだろ。
She yells at me as I lean in to smell the roses with an exaggerated gesture. I thought she was overreacting, but whenever I turned around, I saw Maria imitating my every gesture, and Aniki smiling broadly at us.
ほら、マリアちゃん、気をつけて。バラのトゲは痛いよ。
ほう。このバラだけ変。
That one line didn't get read out.
どうしたんだよ。
Maria pointed at a single rose. I immediately understood what she found odd about it. It was in the midst of all these magnificent roses, one single rose was starting to wilt. There wasn't any particular reason. Some roses flourished while others wilted. And that's all there was to it. But Maria seemed very concerned about the only unhealthy one. Must have made her feel lonely.
このバラだけ元気がなくて、かわいそう？
ほう。他はみんな元気なのに、これだけかわいそう。まあ、咲いたり枯れたりはそれぞれだからな。一足先にしおれる代わりに、そのバラは他のどのバラよりも早く開花できたんだと思うぜ。
そうだよな。いっぱい咲いて、その役目を終えてお休みに入ったってだけのことだと思うぜ。そんなに気に病むことはねえさ。
It seemed that Maria's pure sensitive nature was making her feel some emotional pain for the rose that wilted. Even though she understood the logic of it, it still felt lonely to her.
じゃあマリアちゃん、帰るまでの間、このバラをお世話してあげるといいよ。
George Aniki straightened up and felt around his pocket. He then took out a wrapper from the candy he had been sucking on. Twisted it into a thin string and gently tied it around the marker. Rose as markers.
へえ、なんだか可愛くなったね。
これがこのバラの目印だよ。後でお水とかをあげに来てごらん。バラさんもきっと喜ぶと思うよ。
お水とかあげに来る。
せっかくだからこのバラさんに何か名前をつけてあげるといいよ。そうするとバラさんも喜ぶと思うし。
名前
Though she still wore her usual sullen face, Maria's crossed her arms and began considering this intently. At the very least, she appeared to have completely pulled out of her slump. Nice going, Aniki.
ジョージ兄さんって昔っから包容力があるよな。尊敬するぜ。
だな。人徳ってやつだろ。後で爪の赤をもらってきてやるから一緒に飲もうぜ。
この庭園はお前が子供の頃にもこんなに立派だったんか？
私が出てってからよ、こんなに立派になったのは。前の庭園の方が素朴で愛着があったんだけどね。兄さんがちょっと悪趣味にいじりすぎたのよ。前の方がずっと良かったんだから。
エヴァ、ポジティブシンキングやで。昔は置いといて今のこの美しさをめでなあかん。その方が心が安らかになるで。
別にそんな意味じゃん。ただ私は昔の方が素敵だった庭園をあなたにも見てほしかったな。
それでは皆様よろしいでしょうか。そろそろお部屋の方にご案内いたします。
Goda-san called to everyone to ask if we were ready. But our hearts had been completely stolen away by the rose garden that none of us had seen for years. We didn't pay much attention to him. We We weren't a travel group. It wasn't like we had a strict schedule to follow. Besides, our parents were visiting their old home, full of nostalgia. It wasn't like any of them had to let themselves be urged on by anyone. Understanding the situation, Goda-san continued, smiling widely, until her parents got tired of the roses.
Well? おお、カノン君やないか。久しぶりやな。元気か？
Hideyoshi suddenly shouted. The direction he was waving, slender boy. Meeting him right after a huge man like Goda probably emphasized his small stature. A boy in the middle of the transporting piled up gardening tools, alike in a wheelbarrow. He realized he was being called to stop, and he set down the wheelbarrow, took off his hat, and bowed his head.
こんにちは。
I figured he was probably younger than me, and realized by the general atmosphere surrounding him that he was another servant. He greeted us in response to Uncle Hideyoshi's call, but he seemed like he might be pretty unsocial most of the time. It was a greeting that lacked feeling. When Goda-san noticed our interest had shifted towards him, he went to his boy's sides and introduced us to him.
バトラ様、ご紹介いたします。後宮本家にお仕えしております使用人の一人です。カノンさん、お客様にご挨拶を。
はじめまして。使用人のカノンです。
Yep, my first impressions weren't wrong. He seemed to be unsociable, at least not so good at talking. Compared to Goda-san, who's extraordinarily polished as a servant, I couldn't help but feel inexperienced, typical of his age. Goda-san urged him in a whisper to give a bit more of an introduction. The boy named Kanon only cast his eyes downwards.
カノンさん、もう少し何か挨拶することはできませんか？
いえ、僕たちは家具ですから。
He didn't seem to be refusing to greet us out of spite. Rather, he seemed to have fallen silent because he didn't know what else to say to us.
カノン君は寡黙でさ、余計なおしゃべりはしない性分なんだよ。愛想は少し悪いけど、根はいい人なんだぜ。誤解しないで。ここに勤めて3年になるんだっけ。確かゴーダさんより1年長いんだよな、カノン君。
Even though he wasn't exactly given a terrible first impression, Jessica hurriedly backed him. I see. Apparently his unsociable nature causes a lot of trouble.
そっか。よろしくな。俺はバトラ。18だけど、君はいくつだい？
He fell silent, as if though wondering whether or not the question, was a question he had to answer. But here again, Jessica plowed his head.
確か私たちの2つ下だから16だったよな。
はい、そうです。
Looked like he would have preferred to not tell us his age if given the choice. That was probably because he thought we'd look down on him for it. I remember that whenever I was around his age, I asked how old I was by adults. 16, huh? It's gotta be a dumb time. I probably asked something I shouldn't have.
近いとして嬉しいぜ。気さくにバトラって呼んでくれよな。俺も君のことはカノンって呼ぶぜ。
ありがとうございます。お気持ちだけで結構です。バトラ様。
Jessica looked panicky for some reason. She seemed to have think that my impression of Hanon was only getting worse because of his refusal. Well, as a girl, Jessica probably couldn't understand the fretful male heart at this age. As his elder, even just by 2 years, I took it upon myself to be understanding.
カノンさん、もう少し愛想よくはできませんか？笑顔も使用人の義務ですよ。
申し訳ありません。努力します。
ゴーダさん、カノン君もいろいろ頑張ってるんですよ。ねえ。
I looked like he was often warned about being unsociable, and apparently he had improved one bit. Goda-san kept his business smile, but let out a sigh of resignation.
それではまだ仕事がありますので、失礼します。
Looked like Kenon himself was uncomfortable with remaining silent for any longer. After another perfunctory bow, he turned around and started pushing. Just then, the wheelbarrow suddenly wobbled and fell, scattering blood. The wheelbarrow's single wheel got caught on a pebble and lost its balance.
何をしてるんですか。さ、早く片付けて。
Goda-san urged him to hurry in a quiet voice, as though hinting that it would be shameful for a servant to appear clumsy guests. Kenon wordlessly loaded the wheelbarrow with fallen objects, so to say that he understood quite well without being told. He seemed to be fine with a light-looking gardening shovels, but he looked like he was having trouble getting his arms around and lifting up some stacks of fertilizers.
大丈夫かよ。そそっかしいな。ほら。
お嬢様、お召し物がよ。ここはお任せください。
With a smooth motion, Goda-san took the shovel that Jessica had picked up. Behind him, Kenon was having trouble with the stack of fertilizers.
お召し物が汚れる？
安心しろよ。俺が着てるのは、それによ。俺はレストランで、落ちたフォークをウェイトレスに拾わせるってやつが大嫌いなんだ。
I lifted up the other bags at home. Of course they want that light, but for me it was a piece of cake. Kenon-kun looked at me, surprised. It was the face of someone who never would have expected him to help a guest.
バトラー様、結構です。僕が全てやりますので。
気にすんな。こう見えても鍛え方が違うぜ。へへ。
Kenon-kun looked like he hadn't yet gone through his course. He was stuck with a sort of weak body. This kind of weight might have been too.
結構重いね。カノン君が苦労するのも無理はないよ。カノン君、気にしないで。
これぞ、俺の見せ場さ。これで、さっきの船の分はチャラだよな。
この程度のことじゃ、さっきの大騒ぎが帳消しになるもんかよ。カノン君にも後で教えてやるよ。バトラったら面白いんだぜ。落ちる落ちる。
As they did this, I piled all the stuff back into the room.
お見苦しいところをお見せして、申し訳ございませんでした。
ささ、もう結構ですよ。言ってください。
Letting the guests who are supposed to feel welcome is such a disgraceful thing. It's been hideously unfair. Pressed by Goda to hurry up and go.
ゴーダさんもいじめすぎよ。意地悪言わないで、あなたも手伝えばよかったんじゃない？
これは至りませんで、誠に申し訳ございませんでした。
Even without a twitch in his smile, Goda-san apologized.
カノン君もええところはぎょうさんあるんやで。ただ若いんかの。いろいろもったいないわ。
気難しい年頃さ。そっとしといてやれよ。使用人は寡黙なくらいがちょうどいいさ。な、熊沢さん。
ルドルフ様は手厳しゅうございますこと。私ほど使用人で寡黙なものはおりませんとも。
Everyone smiled really at that obvious lie. Even she herself didn't believe it, not in her wildest dreams. So she must have said it to lighten the mood. Yeah, it's the kind of character Kumasawa Bachan needs to be. The once stiff atmosphere cleared up once thanks to his cheerful smile.
そろそろ荷物を置きたいわね。ゴダさん、部屋割りはどうなってるのかしら。
昨年と同じになっております。さあ、ご案内いたします。どうぞこちらへ。
Kanon watched over a hedge as all the guests entered the guest room. Then he let his eyes fall on those heavy sacks of fertilizer, piling them. In his mind, he kept going over the previous mistake. Battler, big and strong, pick up sacks in front of him, sacks that couldn't handle others. It would be extremely difficult for an outside observer to put emotions that as far as you could tell by watching him. Muttered words escaped. Those words murmured were so soft that they didn't even.
僕だって。
Kanon hung his head, slyly biting.
バラの庭園は記憶にあったんだけどよ、このゲストハウスっつうのは記憶にねえな。これ建てたのは最近か？
Orion, visitors retreat was written on the gatepost-like thing, but since everyone else called it the guest house, I followed their lead. The brand new Western-style guest house, which stood overlooking the roses, had a magnificent design, carefully done and perfect.
正解だよ。建ったのはつい一昨年さ。それ以降は僕たちはこっちに泊めさせてもらってるんだよ。
年季の入ったボロ屋敷よりこっちの方が好評みてえだしな。私も自分の部屋をこっちに持ちたいぜ。はい、マリアも持ちたい。持ちたい。
I guess you could say my own house was upper class, but to me it felt like completely ordinary compared to the head family. The display of wealth was shocking and was the fact that they built this kind of awesome guest house for guests who came over only a few times a year.
エヴァ様、秀吉様、こちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。ルドルフ様、キリエ様はこちらのお部屋をお使いくださいませ。
やっぱりここは綺麗で上品でいいわね。洋風って本当に素敵だわ。
ほんの2、3日なら洋風もええやろが、ずっといて落ち着くのは断固和風やで。日本人は畳の上が一番くつろげるんや。
新しい家を和風にするか洋風にするかで喧嘩してね。お父さんが和風で着工させたのを母さんまだ根に持ってよく言い合いをするんだよ。
ジョージ兄さんのところは両親仲が良くて羨ましいぜ。うちなんか冷め切ったもんさ。そのくせ私の成績の話だけは連帯しやがる。
All the rooms seemed to be for two people. I was grateful since I wasn't going to be forced to share the same room with that old bastard until the pretext that we were family. Anyways, I figured those two wouldn't be enjoying themselves with someone like me around their
何気持ち悪い顔で笑ってんのよ。どうせ下世話なこと考えてるんでしょう。
下世話なんてとんでもない。どうぞごゆっくりお過ごしくださいませ。あ、はい、いえたよ、クソ親父。
バカなこと言ってんじゃねえ。俺は胃がキリキリ痛み始めてて、とてもそんな元気はわかん。今回はお前が主賓。せいぜい親父や兄貴たちに可愛がら。親父の前では言葉遣いにだけ気をつけろ。あの人、本当にシャレが通じねえからな。ジェシカちゃん、我らが当主様のご機嫌は最近どうなんだ？
去年から相変わらずかな。余命3ヶ月、余命3ヶ月って割には、相変わらずピンピン、カリカリ、イライラしてるって話です。
今年も相変わらず不機嫌ってわけね。お守りができるのはやっぱり源氏さんだけなの？
親方様も源氏さんにだけは心を許しておいでのようです。私たち下々では近頃はお目通りすらなかなか叶わず。
また書斎に閉じこもって怪しげな黒魔術三昧じゃねえのかな。何をやろうとてめえの趣味だから構わねえけど、匂いが立ち込める系は勘弁してほしいもんだぜ。ついでにそのまま書斎から永久に出てくんなってんだ。
年長の人にそんな言い方をするもんじゃないよ。後宮家を復興させてくれた大恩人なんだから、もっと感謝しないと。
まあ、ごめん。
After being rebuked by George Aniki, Jessica had no choice but to take back her thoughtless word. The Ushimiya family was wealthy beyond belief. Of course, that means all of its members were a bit strange, completely out of touch with the world at large. And on top of that chain, the family head, our grandfather, seemed especially strange and terrifying, even for our family. Dad said that he was getting a stomachache earlier. I imagine that's reflected on the honest feelings of all the adults. No doubt they were all jealous of us grandchildren. We just play around and laugh without a care. Stories Dad told me, the family head was a violent man, fists, beating his children, his daughters, he was so strict and uptight about that. Why couldn't he have been a little bit more conservative with his kids' names? Because of that, even his grandkids had disappeared. Anyways, I can't say I have trouble believing this. I don't remember meeting him very often, but I think I recall him looking extremely grumpy all the time, always making me cower with that sharp gaze of his. I remember that his room atmosphere got so tense when Ray was around. My dad said about being the guest of honor now carries a little more oomph.
6年前は俺も小学生だったが、さすがに今は高校生だ。失礼のある態度なんか取ったら大変。怖え。
確かにこわもてだけど、そんなに硬くなるほど怖い人、決して理不尽なことは言ってないもん。口下手なだけでちゃんと筋は通す人だよ。
ジョージ兄さんは昔から成績優秀で一族の鏡じゃねえかよ。私たちとじゃじい様の待遇が全然違うぜ。私なんか木刀で引っ叩かれたことあるしよ。尻だぜ尻。それも乙女の生尻をよ。
ジェシカちゃんは本家の跡取り娘だもん。おじい様も特に目をかけてくれてるんだよ。
That didn't read out. So I like.
冗談じゃねえぜ。その跡取りってやつはジョージ兄さんに譲るよ。私が担ぐにはちょいとしんどいぜ。ほう、ジェシカお姉ちゃんが重い？マリアが持ったら軽くなる？サンキューな。大丈夫。マリアちゃんには押し付けねえよ。この十字架は私が墓まで背負ってくよ。安心しなって。
It was great for Maria's innocent concern. Jessica's face still seemed to contain some uneasiness she felt towards the future. Maybe we were in the same boat. Any high schooler with exams approaching would have trouble hiding the anxiety.
マリアいらっしゃい。お母さんとマリアはこの部屋よ。
バトラ君は僕と一緒にこっちの部屋だってさ。
おお、なにこりゃ驚いた。親たちの部屋より広めじゃないのよ。わお
Wow!
どうせいとこ同士で集まるだろうと思ってよ。大きめの部屋にするように言っておいたんだ。おお、マリアも こっちがいい。ママと一緒よりこっちがいい。
そうか。マリアもこっちがいいか。よし。ここは俺とジョージ兄貴の部屋だが、お母さんには内緒だぞ。
内緒。
Aunt Rosa was right behind us, but Maria still answered, striking the air with clenched fists. After setting down their luggage, oh my god, I couldn't argue that. After setting down their luggage in their rooms, our parents had gathered again in the corridor.
おいガキども、お前らはどうする？
Hey,
ここでいとこ同士おしゃべりでもしてるか？
it seemed that they were heading towards the mansion to announce their arrival. Normally, this would make us follow them and greet everyone together. But if that would have been the case, Dad would have just told us to come, and that would be the end of it. Saying it's okay if we don't want to come. So what do we do?
どうせもうすぐお昼や。子供はそこでくつろいでたらええ。それに表で遊べるのは下手をすると今のうちだけかもしれんしの。
マリアも行く。
マリアはここでお留守番してなさい。いたずらをしないでおとなしく待ってるのよ。
Maria is being told to house sit here. We certainly couldn't leave her on her own. Poor Jonaki noticed this immediately and gave a clear reply for all of us as cousins.
じゃあ、僕たちはお言葉に甘えて、1年ぶりに積もる話もあるしね。
それがいいわ。バトラ君なんか6年分積もってるんだしね。
へいへい。お子ちゃまな俺はおとなしくお留守番してるぜ。
熊沢さん、私もこっちに残るからよ。あとは大人に任せて若者は退散してるぜ。
それがおよろしいでしょう。奥様にはそのようにお伝えいたします。
それでは皆様、お屋敷の方へご案内させていただきます。どうぞこちらへ。
他の子はともかく、ジョージは成人してるんだから連れて行った方がいいんじゃん。
そんなんでジョージだけ仲間外れはかわいそうやで。いとこ同士の交流も大事や。ほな、行ってくるで。
The adults left one after another. They left the same formation as our trip from the harbor, with Goda-san leaving and Kurosawa taking up the rear. As we gathered in the room assigned to us cousins, George Aniki asked us to excuse him for a second. He rushed over to Kurosawa-san, who was following behind the disappearing boys. Soon finished his business and came back.
どうしたんだよ、兄貴。
ああ、ちょっと聞きたいことがあっただけさ。
マリアにも聞いて。マリアにも聞いて。何かな。ジョージ兄さんが私に聞かなくてなあ、全然見当がつかねえぜ。
いや、誤解だよ。ジェシカちゃんが何を誤解してるのか知らないけど。
Jonaki was getting pretty tongue-tied. It was almost as though he felt guilty about something. Jessica knew exactly what he was worried about. At any rate, it's no fun for Jessica to get to know about it and not be.
なあ、マリア。俺たちだけのけ者なんてねえよな。何の話か聞きてえよな。
バトラとマリアも聞きたい。バトラとマリアも聞きたい。
I fooled around while oohing together with Maria.
いや、だから大したことじゃ。
さっつけ。兄貴にしちゃ嘘が下手だぜ。拍手しやがれ。マリア、お前は右脇をくすぐれ。俺は左脇だ。
マリアは右脇だ。バトラは左脇だ。
ちょっと二人ともやめて。やめ。
Maria and I played around, chasing George Aniki as he tried to escape, rolling on the bed. I realized high schoolers aren't supposed to bounce around like kittens, but I still miss this kind of fun. Warm, cozy kind of fun.
ジョージ兄さんが熊沢さんに聞いたのはね。
What were you asking Kumasawa-san?
まあ、ほら、あれだぜ。
Well, I got a good guess.
兄さんも本家は1年ぶりだから
It's been a
ね。
year since the last time you visited the head family.
その間に辞めた使用人
Who
と
knows
か
what
入っ
servants
た
might
使
have
用
come
人
and
と
gone
か。
during that time.
そういうのがいた
Either
ら
way, it looks like
挨
he's
拶したいって。
like to
そ
go
う
in
い
and
う
say
ことら
hi.
しいぜ。
Whoa! Let's calm down with that one there, Buster. Think about what we're calling me.
挨拶する。マリアも挨拶す
Say
る。
hi. I want to say hi too.
なんだよそれ。全然やましくねえじゃねえかよ、兄貴。
Oh yeah, I'm not supposed to be reading this.
違うな。マリア、騙されるな。兄貴は何か隠してるぞ。尋問再開だ。うおりゃ。
やめてよ本当に。マリアちゃんももうやめて。
多分掃除とか昼飯の準備とかで忙しいんだ。大丈夫。後でちゃんと挨拶に来るぜ。ゴーダの出しゃばりの出迎えよりシャノンの出迎えの方が良かったって言うんだろ。
シャノン？シャノン。思い出したぜ。そんな子もいたな。今も使用人やってんのか？元気かよ。
そういや、夏日姉さん。最近頭痛の方はどう？一時だいぶしんどそうにしとったろ。
おかげで最近はだいぶ調子がいいです。心配をしてくれてありがとう。そうだ、これ夏日姉さんにお土産。いつもありがとう。あなたには何かをもらってばかりね。これは紅茶？ペパーミントとレモンバームのハーブティー。頭痛によく効くって有名なお店のブレンドなの。姉さんにも効くかなって思って。
Rosa was always a contentious one. Probably because she was the youngest of four and much younger than the other three. She managed to grow up without gaining the venomous nature of her siblings. Her kind words got Natsui to soften her expression just for a moment. But it wasn't enough to melt her stony gaze, hardened as it was by long years of mental stress.
そういえばあなた、いっつも頭痛だって言ってたわね。しっかりなさいな。ジェシカちゃん、今年は受験でしょ？人生の節目じゃない。母親のあなたがそんなじゃ頼りないわよ。それに夏日姉さん、私より3つも若いんだから。もうちょっとしっかりなさい。
ごめんなさい。生まれつきの頭痛持ちなもので。
Under normal circumstances, Eva sometimes failed to choose her words. But her comments aimed at Natsui contained shards of an obvious malice. She hid it well with a smile. Of course, that fact didn't escape Natsui. She frantically contained her urge to grimace and pretend to ignore.
うちのバトラ君も今年は受験でしょ？ルドルフさんも少しは関心を持ったら？自分の息子のために夏日姉さんみたいに頭痛になるくらい真剣になりなさいよ。
俺が何か言えば必ず反抗するやつだぜ。じゃあなんて言うんだ。むしろ逆で遊んでていいぞっていうのが、あいつそういうのだけは素直に聞きやがるぜ。秀吉兄さんのところは受験本当にうまくいったじゃないですか。ぜひ 子供操縦術の秘訣を教えてくださいよ。
そうやな。何のために勉強するのかっちゅうことを説いたかもしれんな。個々の勉強に意味があるわけやないんや。そう、勉強っちゅうのはわからんことを自分で調べて身につけるという行為の練習なんや。これができんやつは社会に出ても使い物にならん。国語算数ができろと言ってるんやない。勉強し身につけることを学べっちゅうことやな。
ご立派ですわ。うちのジェシカにもそれが理解できればいいんだけど、今のままではとてもじゃないけど、後宮家の跡取りとしては。
いいじゃないの。無理に跡取りにしなくても。女には女の幸せというものもあるんだし、それを親が押し付けちゃ悪いわよ。
予算買えば子供の育て方は家それぞれや。押し付けがましいのはあかんで。
ごめんなさい。夏日姉さんも気を悪くしないでね。
Though the light shimmering through the window was quite warm despite the cloudy weather, there was a dark mood about the room, causing headaches for more than just Nancy. To sweep away the mood, Carrie brightly made a suggestion.
でも本当に素敵な香りの紅茶ね。早速いただいてみましょうよ。レオポルドの紅茶なんて日本じゃ確か銀座でしか買えなかったはずよ。
キリエ姉さんはお詳しいですね。買ってきた甲斐がありました。
Carrie and Rosa stood up from the seats and made as if to prepare black tea. Natsui forestalled them.
お二人ともありがとう。それは後でいただきましょう。うちの者がすぐお茶を持ってきますので、どうぞおくつろぎください。
二人とも後にしろよ。ウェルカムドリンクくらいごちそうになろうぜ。
Natsuri bit her lower lip, frustrated by the ineptitude of this late break. Seeing her face, Ava immediately started to weep. Of course, Shannon had no way of knowing what was taking place in that parlor. She came pushing her serving cart, piled with teacups. No apparent reason, Natsuri gave her a pained look. Shannon couldn't help but flinch without knowing what she had done wrong.
失礼いたします。お茶のご用意をさせていただきます。
おう、シャノンちゃん、久しぶりやの。ますますべっぴんさんになりよったな。
いえ、どうも。
おしゃべりは配膳を済ませてからになさい。お茶が冷めます。
申し訳ございません、奥様。
She apologized like a small frightened animal bumped against the serving cart and made drawing racks as she dropped several teaspoons. Clumsiness made Natsui's expression turn dark, which made Shan swallow even more.
いいのよ、夏日姉さん。挨拶の一つくらいしたってどうってことないわよ。もう十分待たされてる分、十分お茶も冷めてるもの。
それは大丈夫です。冷めてはおりませんので。
シャノン、早く配膳を済ませなさい。
失礼しました、奥様。
Natsui's irritation was obvious by now. The ineptitude that delayed the tea, the clumsiness of the servant, everything pointed to the incompetence of every day, making her lose faith. As the person in charge of the Ushimiya head family's kitchen, allowing that clumsiness to be exposed, today of all days, was surely nothing less than torture.
よせよ、夏日姉さん。シャノンちゃんだって頑張ってるのに、いじめちゃかわいそうだぜ。
いじめてなんかいません。
いい香りね。お茶の銘柄を聞いてもいいかしら。
申し訳ございません。後ほど調べてまいります。
Kiri was trying to be nice, hoping to cut through the tenseness. However, Shannon had embarrassed herself instead, darkening Natsui's face and shadow in the room. By this point, Ava was audibly...
なーにシャノンちゃん、自分で入れてるものが何かもわからないの？ダメよ。そんな怪しげなものを来客に振る舞っちゃ。こんなお茶じゃ銀のスプーンでもないと飲めないわよ。
すみません。すぐに用意を。
ねえシャノンちゃん、銀のスプーンって何に使うか知ってる？銀じゃないとダメなのよ。なぜかわかる？
いえ、
Teasing smile arose to Ava's face. She stared at Shannon's head. By itself, Ava's expression was sweet. However, the words being spun from her lips held the keys. Shannon tried with all of her might to avoid Ava's continuous gaze. Realizing that Shannon was hard-pressed for an answer, Rosa gave something time.
銀は毒に触れると曇るって言われてるの。シャノンちゃんも一つお勉強ができたわね。
They were acting as if those tea needed to be tested for poison. In Natsui's eyes, this was an insult to both the tea and to herself. Rudolph, laughing flippantly, patted Ava's shoulder.
姉貴に銀食器なんていらねえだろう。毒舌の姉貴が一舐めしたら銀の皿だって真っ黒に曇っちまうぜ。
わしはその毒舌を毎日聞かされとるからもう毒に耐性がついてしもたわ。エヴァもわし相手には構わんが耐性のない相手にはちいと加減せんとな。
あらあらひどい。シャノンちゃんにお茶の知識を教えてあげただけじゃない。
Everyone followed the lead set by Hideyoshi, of course laughing and chuckling, though not as easily. Only Natsui didn't join. But for the time being, the conversation inside the parlor could now be mistaken for a lively and friendly chat. As Shannon finally finished setting the table and tried to leave, Kyrie apologized to her in a low voice for not being able to help. Shannon gave a light bow and made a hasty exit. Shannon cast her eyes downwards as she pushed the cart down the corridor. Anyone seeing the painful... oh my god, I just fucked that up altogether. Anyone seeing the pitiful way she looked might easily lead in something.
気を落とさないで。姉さんは何も悪くない。
見てたのね。
そういうお役目だから。奥様もエヴァ様も地獄へ落ちろ。でもそれより卑劣なのはあいつだ。
Shannon glared hatefully in the opposite direction of the parlor. Preparations for the tea had been delayed by some trifling problems in the kitchen. These problems were not Shannon's fault. In fact, it had been Goda's mistake. After all, there was no way a show-off like Goda would give up a flashy job like bringing in tea when the guests arrived. He had ended up wasting time preparing the tea once again, so when he realized he wouldn't be able to score any points for this job, he pushed the task of setting the table onto Shannon, who happened to be passing by. You might call it a clever move on his part, but there could be no doubt that was a cowardly one.
いいの。ありがとう、カノン君。私、全然気にしていないし。
Cannon's sounds vividly expressed the distance between Shannon's words and how she actually felt.
ありがとう。
姉さんは心にいろいろ溜め込みすぎる。たまには自分に優しくしてあげて。
うん、ありがとうね。
Suddenly, they both felt someone's presence in the world around. A middle-aged man stood there. It was Genji, the head servant.
そこで何をしているシャノン。早く厨房に戻りなさい。
はい、失礼いたしました。
Cannon humbly obeyed and promptly made the push to depart. However, Cannon appealed to Genji in silence, bearing something Daisei could not express in words.
どうした何かあったか
シャノンは何も悪くないのに。あいつら。
やめてカノン君。失礼しました。すぐに仕事に戻ります。カノン君も自分の持ち場に戻って。お願い。
姉さんがそう言うなら。
何事もないならそうしなさい。
はい、失礼します。
In the shadows in the hallway, an old woman wearing an apron watched over them. Sawa.
おいたわしや。シャノンさん、カノンさん。あの二人がいじめられる理由は何もないのです。しかし、ゴーダさんに嫌われているのは紛れもない事実。ゴーダさんは後宮本家へいらっしゃられるまで、どこかの立派なホテルにお勤めだったそうです。そこで身につけられたというお仕事ぶりは、そりゃ大したものだとは思います。ただ、ゴーダさんはここでは最も年季の短い使用人。ご自身のそれまでの積み重ねによるプライドもあられたのでしょう。彼は自分より長い年季を持ちながらも、未熟で人生経験も及ばないシャノンさんとカノン君をことあるごとにいびられるのです。また気の毒なことに夏日奥様にも嫌われております。もちろん年季という意味では奥様の方が長くこの家におられます。ただこればかりは奥様にも同情し、本当に親方様も罪作りな方でございます。ご自身のちょっとした気まぐれが奥様にこれほどまでの劣等感をお与えになるとは。もちろん奥様とて内心はあの二人に辛く当たる言われは何もないことを。しかしそれが理屈で分かっているからといってどうにもならないのがほいたわしや。私には何もできず、こうして物陰から見守ることしかできないのです。
Kept thinking it ended, but it never ended. You know what? We're gonna read one more chapter today. That one was only about an hour long. Four cousins were enjoying our stories, just shooting the breeze. Anyways, there were both girls and guys here. Plus we had a group of people widespread of ages, high schoolers and elementary school. Even if we just talked about our own lives, the other three kept listening.
なんかやっと馴染んできたぜ。ジェシカもマリアも6年前からは想像もつかないくらい成長しちまったからよ。正直なところ少しだけ違和感を持ってたんだが、こうして話をしているうちに。
同じ言葉を返してやるよ。バトラだって6年ぶりだってのに全然図体がいくらでかくなっても中身は相変わらずお子様だってことだな。マリアもお子様、マリアもお子様。
マリアだっていつまでもお子様じゃねえぞ。お子様から可愛いお姫様に成長してくんだからな。そうしたらまな板みてえな胸もすぐジェシカ並みになるぞ。そしたら揉ませてくれよ、約束だぞ。
揉ませる約束。
ダメだよマリアちゃん、そんな約束しちゃダメ。
It's a bit problematic.
おお、約束したからマリア、約束は絶対守る。
マリア、お前と結婚する未来の旦那さんは きっと幸せも。
っていい話にすり替えつつ、マリア、その約束はなしなし。
約束と。
やっぱりバトラ君も揃って4人で集まらないと、この6年はやっぱり寂しかったよ。
そうだな。こういうふざけた話にはならなかったな。でも、建設的な話はできてたと思ったぜ。将来に対する心構えとか、受験とか就職とか。
悪うございましたね。俺が来たらおまぬけなドタバタばっかりでよ。
でもマリアは今年のが
そうだね。僕も同感。今年が一番楽しいよ。
Maria's sincere words probably spoke for everyone present. Poor John K shook Maria's head as she giggled like a happy kitten. Kinda weird.
失礼いたします。お食事のご用意ができました。
Amid knocking sound, he gleaned in the voice of a young woman. Jessica answered brightly.
シャノン、入れよ。バトラは覚えてるだろ。
Jessica stood up from the bed and opened the door. Stood a servant girl who must have been about our age.
ご無沙汰いたしております。6年ぶりでございます。シャノンです。
Trembling a little as she noticed me, she bowed deeply.
ジェシカにも驚かされたが、シャノンちゃんにも驚かさ、あんたもすっかり美人になったじゃねえのよ。
もったいないお言葉。
しかしよ、この島じゃよっぽど食事の栄養価が高いんじゃねえの。何を食ってどこを鍛えたらそんなにでっかいお胸になるんだか。ジェシカとどっちがでけえかちょいと触って確かめさせてもらうぜ。
With both hands pointed and saliva dribbling from his mouth, I closed in. For the sake of justice and my personal honor, I'd like to point out that I don't suffer from any strange disease that makes my lymph nodes itch until I scratch my neck open, which can only be prevented by fondling breasts. This is just Badler-style method of communication. If I slowly close in like on this, odds are 8 or 9 out of 10 that I'll get slapped or clobbered, right? So I can use this Badler-style original technique to spark a gag like that and break the ice. Well, it also meant I really do get to touch them in that 1 of 10 chance though, right? Like that, it will happen. At some point, my hands were less than a centimeter away from Shannon's boobs, but the counter-strike had yet to come. She blushed and lowered her head in embarrassment when she realized what was going on. But she just stood there with both hands politely joined in front of her, not even trying to resist or cover her breasts. Hey, I wasn't planning on this. Please hit me right now. I'm serious, or I'm gonna... That's why I'm glad that Jessica chose that time to drive her elbow into the back of my head.
ジェシカ、ありがとうよ。
なんで私が感謝されんだ。
いやいや、すまんぜシャノンちゃん。魅力的な胸に思わず吸着されそうになっちまった。つうか、さすがにあの間合いまで来たら犯罪。ダメだぜ、抵抗しなきゃよ。
ですけど、バトラ様は大切なお客様ですし。
あのな、お客様でも犯罪は犯罪。女の子の胸はだいたい10センチくらいからが防空識別圏だな。2センチ圏まで侵入してきたら、これはもう領空侵犯だぜ。スクランブル発進で即ビンタを食らわせてやれ。
そんなことできません。私たちは家具ですし。
Of course, she didn't want her breasts such, but if a guest so desired, she was prepared to sacrifice to suit their wants. A girl like this needs some urgent attention.
今時こんな献身美徳な子がいるとは。軽いめまいすら覚えるぜ。でもダメだ。ダメなんだ。俺がいやらしい顔で迫る。ハッタウス。いや、エッチ。 そういうお約束じゃないとオチがつかねえんだよ。頼むよ。こう、バチンと
お願いは聞けません。家具ですから。でも、命令ならお聞きします。それが務めですから。
次からバトラ君が胸に触ろうとしてきたらいいね。
はい、仰せつかりました。以後そのようにさせていただきます。バトラ様、ご承知おきくださいませ。
Shannon-chan announced this while bowing elegantly to me. Her expression was radiant. I gave her a thumbs up to show her that I was fine with that.
6年前はお手伝いさんの連れ子がついでにお手伝いみたいな印象だったんだけど、すっかり一人前の使用人さんだな。今年で何年になるんだ？
はい、おかげさまで10年ほどお仕えさせていただいております。
The kanji for her name is read as Shannon. Now here's another name that's far from typical Japanese person. Back in the day, I was a kid myself, so I accepted her name without paying much attention. Thinking about it now, though, her name's pretty unusual, even though she's not a member of the family of the Yoshimiya family. Maybe it's like a certain servant's professional name or something. If so, that might explain why her name's so similar to Kanon-kun, that kid that I met earlier in the Rose Garden. She's a long-term server who's been serving here since she was 6 years old. Her appearance has changed so much that I couldn't match her to the person of my memories. But we both knew that each other 6 years ago. That shy part of her has always been there, but she did seem to have developed an allure that you would expect of a girl her age. Especially in her breasts, yes.
さっき会ったカノン君は彼女の弟なんだよ。
弟というわけでは。でも、私のことを姉と慕ってくれます。何か失礼なことはしませんでしたか？
相変わらずいつも通りだぜ。もうちょっと愛想よくすればいいのによ。もったいない。
カノン君がご迷惑をおかけしたようで申し訳ございません。
別に迷惑なんか何も。同じ男としてわかるさ。ありゃ気難しい年頃だ。愛想が悪いのは当たり前だぜ。
マリアもよく言われる。愛想悪いって言われる。カノンと一緒。マリア様は愛想悪くなんかありません。一緒がよかった。
食事の準備ができたんだっけ？
失礼いたしました。お食事のご用意が整いましたので、皆様をお屋敷へご案内いたします。
And bowed again formally and returned to her duty mode. Realized that we made her stick around for any more light conversation. It would actually make it harder for her to do her job. We got up off our butts to avoid interfering.
じゃあお屋敷に行こうか。
So, shall we get to the main?
みんなもお腹が空いてたところでしょ。
だな。ゴーダさんがいる時の飯は楽しみなんだよ。あの人、どこぞの有名ホテルでシェフをやってたらしくて、かなり料理の腕があるんだぜ。
ほうほう。それ楽しみ。行こうぜマリア。ガツガツ犬みたいに食い散らかすぞ。
犬みたいに食い散らかす。
ダメダメ。バトラ君の言うことはいちいち真に受けちゃダメだよ。全部冗談なんだから。さあ、行こう行こう。
Under Shannon's guidance, we headed towards the mansion. Met once again by the magnificent Rose Garden, we continued onwards, to the intimidating mansion of the Yoshimiya family. It had apparently been built shortly after the war, so you could feel the dignity of almost half a century being without it. The building was gorgeous on the surface, but old as it was, equipment such as AC and heating were apparently quite fragile. According to Jessica, midwinter was especially tough, what with all the drafts. Haven't these people ever heard of a kotatsu? As we entered the entrance hall, all in aged servants. Now him I remember. Genji-san, who had been working here longer than anyone, filled the role of head servant.
バトラ様、お久しゅうございます。
As our eyes met, he greeted me with a calm, composed voice. His bow wasn't graceful or refined as goes, but despite its simplicity, it communicated his feelings.
源氏さん、本当にお久しぶりっす。お元気そうですね。
おかげさまで健やかに過ごさせていただいております。バトラ様こそご立派になられました。親方様の若き日に少し似てこられましたな。
俺がじい様にってことは、さぞやじい様は若い頃モテたろうな。
ここからはシャノンに代わって私がご案内申し上げます。どうぞこちらへ。
Shannon bowed deeply and watched us leave. After that, we headed towards the dining room under Genji-san's guidance. Genji-san, just like Kumasawa-san, stood in stark contrast to us young people who had grown beyond recognition over the last 6 years. His appearance was exactly the same as I remember. It was as if though time had stopped since the last time we met. Genji-san was extremely quiet and diligent. He was basically grandfather's close aide or caregiver. You might even call him grandfather's companion of many years. In fact, he was seen by grandfather's side even more than my late grandmother was. According to Jessica, grandfather trusted him more than any of his blood relatives. But I wonder how long he served. I never got the details, but I heard something about him being there since the very beginning when his mansion was first constructed, which would mean that he's dedicated half of his life to serving here. It's easy to see why he's so trusted. As we passed through the massive hall that extended up to the second story of the mansion, no separating floor, I spotted something that hadn't existed in my memory of 6 years. There was an awfully big portrait hanging right in front of the stairs that rose to the second floor. Without thinking, I stopped walking, captivated by it. Since I'd stopped so fast, Maria, who was following behind me, ran onto my back.
ああ、悪い。なあ、ジェシカ。あんな絵、前はあったっけ？
I pointed out the big, predominantly displayed portrait wall. Everyone else stopped too.
ああ、そっか。バトラが来てた頃には、あれはかけられてなかったっけ？いつからだったかな。
確か、僕の記憶が正しければ、一昨年あたりだったと思うよ。
さようでございます。一昨年の4月に、親方様がかねてより画家に命じて描かせていたものを、あそこに展示なす。
あのじい様がね、わざわざ描かせてか。
Portrait seated this western mansion. A woman in the elegant dress gave off a sense of I couldn't have guessed her age, but her sharp eyes and the strong will she seemed somehow different from the composed, middle-aged woman often seen. She had normal black hair. I might have assumed it was a portrait of my long-deceased grandmother in her prime. However, she had beautiful blonde hair and didn't look Japanese at all.
で、誰だい？このご婦人はよ。
Maria answered the simple question enthusiastically, as if proud she knew the answer.
マリア知ってる。ベアトリーチェ。
ベア、なんだって？
ベアトリーチェ。魔女だよ。バトラ君は昔聞かされたことない？
魔女？って、この島の？
I think I already said this, but Rokkenjima is a small island, only 10 kilometers in circumference. However, that's actually pretty massive considering that only the Ushimiya family lives here. It's the only harbor in the area around the mansion was set up to be lived in. Beyond that, the island remains as untouched as it was whenever it was uninhabited. The vast and empty forest with absolutely no light, phones, or people passing through. To understand how dangerous that is, you need to forget your common senses. After all, if you happen to fall down in a hole in the depths of the forest and sprain your ankle, no one would come save you, no matter how much you cried or screamed. Then, once the sun went down, the forest would be wrapped in complete darkness, since there were no streetlights. Since there were no signs, it would be pretty easy to get lost and confused, losing a sense of direction inside that dark forest. Nowadays, most people see a forest as a peaceful place, but to the people of bygone eras, before light and civilization drove out the night, forests were as geographically separated from civilization as the sea. They were oceans above the ground. Fishermen would go out to the ocean by putting their lives at risk despite their technical knowledge. Same way, hunters who would go out to the forest are in danger just by having specialized knowledge of their own. Children were to go play in such a dangerous forest, something terrible might happen. Some parents might have thought so. Maybe grandmother said it first. Maybe it was grandfather himself. Or perhaps the story has been passed down in silence since ancient times. There's a terrible witch in the forest. You must not go in. As someone pointed, this is the ghost story of Rokkenjima. This is this legend of the Rokkenjima's witch. That's why, whenever we talk about the witch on the island, we're referring to the master of the vast and savage forest. Come to think of it, whenever I stayed at this mansion as a little kid during those eerie nights when the wind and rain pounded on the windows, I remembered being terrified of the story of the forest witch who roamed around searching for the faces. When Aniki mentioned it, it searched my memory. I'm sure I recalled a name like that whenever I was little.
しかし、あの魔女伝説の魔女にベアトリーチェなんておしゃれな名前がついてたとは、とんと忘れてたぜ。じいさまめ。孫たちが信じないもんだから、わざわざ絵に描きやがったか？
じいさまの妄想の中の魔女だよ。この絵を掲げた頃から、現実と幻想の区別がつかなくなり始めた。私たちにとっては想像の中の魔女に過ぎないけど、じいさまにとっては、いる。だから、それを理解することができない私たちにもわかるよう、あの絵を描かせた。気持ち悪いったらありゃしないぜ。
お嬢様、親方様にとっては大切な肖像画です。親方様の前でそのようにおっしゃられることがございませんよ。
わかってるぜ。頼まれても言わねえよ。
Jessica glanced at the portrait with an irritated gaze before turning.
行こうよ。食堂にみんなを待たせてるよ。
おい、お腹すいた。
Only a small portion of this island was controlled by nature. All of the lawless remainder was the domain of the witch. Might even call her the true I felt a faint revival of that unsettling sense. I felt whenever I learned God's shrine being struck by lightning. I remember that Kumasawa said this, tried to tell an ominous story about Rokkenjima before Jessica stopped her. I don't know what she was planning to tell us about this island, but I do know one thing. The Shiromiya family that rules her the Witch Beatrice. That's right. After all, this is the witch's When I looked around, everyone was already heading towards the dining. I hurried, chased after them. We walked up to the huge double doors that led to the dining room. Genji-san
お子様方を失礼いたします。
The doors were opened and we were invited inside. The dining room, which looked exactly like you imagine a rich person's dining room to be, had a super long table that was obviously positioned with no purpose other than to make guests conscious of their earnings. Our parents were already sitting in accordance with that.
遅えぞガキども。早く席につけよ。
That old bastard pressed us to sit. The only gaps in the group of people were the spots we were supposed to sit. It only made us feel our tardiness all the more. The seat at the head of the table, called the insipid chair, was for the most highly ranked, reserved her grandfather. Still empty. Probably wanted to show a blast for dramatic effect. Perspective of someone sitting in the insipid chair head on. The seating order went from left to right, with the lowest ranking seats progressing in rows of 2 away from him. So the left side had the first row, closest to the insipid chair was where Uncle Charles should have sat. But looks like he hadn't arrived yet, so that seat was empty. Across from that chair on the right side on the first row sat the eldest daughter of the family, Aunt Ava, who was the third highest in rank. Left-hand side of the second row was the fourth highest rank. There sat my damned dad, Rudolph, the third of the siblings. Across from him on the right side of the second row sat Aunt Rosa, the youngest sibling. At this point, you might expect their husbands and wives to come next. But no, the left-hand seat on the third row, rank number 6, belonged to Jessica. Opposite her was George Aniki. I sat next to Jessica. Maria sat across from her. And finally, on my left-hand side, on the 5th row, sat Aunt Natsui, the highest rank. Opposite her was Uncle Higo. Next to Aunt Natsui, in the 6th row, in the final seat on the left-hand side, sat Kiria. The seat opposite to Kiria was empty, even though there was silverware that had been set there in April. According to his ranking system, that's where Aunt Rose's husband should be sitting. Even though he was supposed to be coming, his place was made up. Normally, ranking systems of this sort give spouses equal positions as their parents, as their partners, but the Yoshimiya family system is maybe as a remnant of male chauvinism. Yeah, probably sexism. Start with the assumption that a woman's womb is just something to be borrowed, then the children of direct descendants would come first, directly by their grandchildren. In other words, spouses had no blood ties and were therefore at the place at the end of the table. It's terrible, but this system, my grandmother would be ranked even lower than me, still alive. In their youth, they obeyed father. After they got married, their husband. After aging, their children. There's an old saying: "Women have no home in any realm." Long ago, I was still incapable of figuring out. I thought it'd been so great since I could all chat in our room. All siblings with adult siblings, cousins with cousins. However, now that I can re-examine our seating order, there's some very complicated. Aunt Natsui was married to the eldest son, who was de facto number 2 in Anjing's family, sat to my right, which meant that she was 2 steps lower than me. Hard to imagine what must be going on inside of her heart. So I made a small apologetic gesture towards her before sitting down.
お久しぶりですね、バトラ君。ずいぶん背が伸びましたね。
はい。食ったり食べたり食事したりしてたらいつの間にかこんな身長に。
さすが男の子ね。身長はいくつくらいあるの？
180かな。つうかおばさん、そこは食べてばっかりじゃねえかって突っ込んでく。
ああごめんなさいね。
After a short pause, she did laugh with me, but it seemed she couldn't quite figure out what she was supposed to be laughing at. This woman is Aunt Natsui. She's the wife of the eldest son of the family, meaning that she's my father's older brother's wife. But if if it's simpler, I'll just call her Jessica's mother. Feels bad to say this, but while I don't exactly dislike her, I don't particularly like her either. She hardly spoke with us kids, and all my memories involved her talking to adults and complaining about things with a scary look. In fact, since we hardly ever exchange words, I spent a long time trying to figure out how I should approach her. But my efforts seem to have been a failure. Silverware sat neatly on the table. The meal itself hadn't been brought in yet. As a general rule, you couldn't start a meal until the person sitting at the head of the table arrived. So as long as grandfather didn't come, lunch would be put on hold indefinitely. Not even the appetizers would arrive. Simply put, the silence was caused by our parents enduring their hunger while we waited for grandfather to return. However, the grandfather from my memories would also show up on time to meals like this. He was the kind of person to never be so late as to keep everyone waiting, especially the entire group.
遅えな、じいさま。俺の記憶じゃ時間に厳格な人だったと思うんだけどな。
まあ、6年前はそうだったかもな。最近はそうでもねえよ。というか、もう自分の世界オンリーって感じで、会食にも顔を出さねえぜ。
Give me 1 second. Okay, alright, sorry about that. I really just had to send a couple texts. In fact, he's off on his own little world. He often doesn't even show up to family meals.
さすがに今日くらいは足並みを揃えてくれるって思ってたんだけどな。まあ、私は来ない方が気楽で嬉しいけどよ。
ジェシカ。
No way around it. Might as well wait until our host arrives. Whenever I glanced at the clock, I saw that it was almost 12:20. Night? Okay. William Mia Kinsley, aged family head of the issue. This man is the analyst. The clock had already passed noon. He went up to spectacles on, he grew up by it. Of a growing books, elaborate bindings, which he then couldn't really say that he was having too much fun to stop. Rather that he filled the room with a sense of peace, or perhaps a sense of so every second wasted. These odors were somehow sweet. Anyone with a normal nose came in. Oh, wait. Oh, I didn't read the first one. Oopsie. In the sealed room, a dense dust danced through the air, which was thick with the stench of chemicals, IT, and the normal nose tape. First thing they do is knock against the study door, going on for a while. A voice calling father, sometimes muffled knocks. As Kenzo heavily heaved a deep sigh, he snapped shut his old book in his hands. Then he yelled at Cross, who was still knocking at the door.
Yakamoshi! その音を止めぬか愚か者。叩けば扉は開かれると誰がそのバカ者は貼り付けにしたぞ。お前もそうされたいのか。
お父さん、年に一度の親族会議の日ではありませんか。皆下に集まっています。どうかおいでください。
Kraus called to his father through the door. So always shut himself up in the study, hating however nearly anyone in his family entered the room. For that reason, Kraus had no choice but to call him from the door.
私にかがうでない。皆とは何か私をここから引きずり出そうとする者どもならば殺してしまい。バラバラにして薪にして魔女の炉にくべ、その炉には鍋をかけて苦いおもぎを煮るがいい。黙示録の煮汁はそれでも私をここから連れ出そうとするバカ者どもに飲ませてやれ。残りは酒につけるのだ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。苦害の魔師を用意させろ。緑の妖精のささやきが届かぬ。ああ、源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
On the other side of the door, Kraus, Nanjo, and Genki kept waiting for the master of the house, who stubbornly refused to come.
すっかり嫌われてしまったようだ。もう私の声では何も届かんよ。
Kraus shrugged as though saying it's no use. But in the beginning, he hadn't really expected his father to respond to calls. However, since it was the duty of the eldest son, he had tried as a formality.
金蔵さん、あんたの顔を見に、息子や娘や孫たちが来てるんじゃないか。ちょっと顔を見せてやったらどうだね。
うるさい、黙れ。私に意見するというか何条。貴様など呼んではおらぬ。私は源氏を呼べと言ったのだ。さあ急げ、すぐに呼べ。時間は常に有限だ。人たちはすでにラッパを構えているぞ。なぜにそれがわからぬか、愚かな羊どもめ。
Kinzo slammed an old heavy book against the table over and over. The racket clearly expressed his greatness. Kinzo pulled his spectacles down. He spread his arms wide as if to sing a packed opera house, as if appealing to someone, and yelled,
なぜだ。なぜにいつも私には邪魔が入るのか。すべてを捨てよう。すべてを捧げよう。その見返りに私は一つしか求めないというのに。ああ、ベアトリーチェ。お前の微笑みをもう一度見られるならば、私は世界中から美少を奪い取り、すべてをお前に捧げよう。おお、イナゴの軍団長たちよ。世界中から美少を刈り取り収穫せ。ああ、すべてが汚らわしい。すべてが煩わしい。
なぜこの貴重な一日に私は邪魔を受けねばならぬのか。源氏を呼べ。
何を怒鳴ってるのかもさっぱりだな。もう頭がどうにかなっているのだろう。
クラウスさん、実のお父さんにそりゃあんまりじゃないかね。
親父はすでに死んでいる。ここにいるのは親父だったものの幻さ。いずれにせよ本人にここを出る意志がない以上どうにもならんね。
金蔵さん。
Cooking coughs continued to pour.
私は下に戻る。ゴーダの自慢のランチをこれ以上無駄に冷ましてしまうことはない。親類たちにとって当家での数少ない楽しみだろうからな。
House spun around. He looked at his watch, mumbling and acting as though he had
源氏さん、親父殿がお呼びだ。相手を頼む。
かしこまりました。
南條先生、食事に行きましょう。いつまでもここにいるとこの甘い匂いで味覚までおかしくなってしまう。
Without watching for Nanjo, Cross went downstairs. Genji urged Nanjo to go. Nanjo glanced between the study door and the black houses appeared to see. Let out a deep sigh.
すまんが源氏さん、頼みます。
はい、お任せください。
お酒はなるべく与えないように。あれは常習性が強すぎる。源氏はまだか。何者が源氏を阻んでいるというのか。源氏はどこだ。源氏を呼べ。
さあ、ここはお任せください。
すみませんな。
Nanjo bowed slightly. Genji watched him leave and knock on the study door.
親方様、源氏でございます。
源氏か。何故私をこれほどに待たすのか。そこには誰もおるまいな。
はい、私だけでございます。
Enzo returned to his seat and studied his old-fashioned sword. Small delay in the Enzo was convinced that his family wanted to make a mess of his study, or perhaps someone had once opened the window for some fresh air and it was scattering things that to him were important, leaving him in a terrible mood. Enzo had outfitted his room with preventing anyone from entering without his permission, thereby sealing himself inside a jail of his own. Genji, trusted the most, was relatively free to enter the room, but didn't always hold. If Kenzo was in a bad mood, someone else would be limited to holding conversations or unable to even see. Most of the time, what they got, they could hardly be. However, this didn't trouble her. After all, it was just wasn't worth the effort to disturb the stage. Possible to please, always stayed shut and burst. Taking advantage of his refusal to leave the room, they supported his isolation, putting his care entirely in the hands of the servants.
源氏、いつ私は忙しい。
はい。
Genji headed to a corner of the study. Their suspicious-looking bottles boasting venomous colors were on display. They were actually liquor, but considering the shady atmosphere of the room, one might easily suspect of them as poison. Inside of the study, there was a mysterious collection of books gathered by Kinzo and thrown into mountains. They were bizarre, ancient, or banned books, all of them either forbidden, cursed, or sealed. If you tried to call them old books, Kinzo would fly into a room and say, "All them grimoires!" There were also many mysterious objects which secretly had some meaning with regards to black magic, like candles suspiciously melted and molded in strange shapes. Constellation draws on certain celestial globe contained quite a few shapes that would draw puzzled looks from anyone familiar with the sky. Carelessly strewn about books contain many illustrations, all of them religious or mysterious in nature, including some depicting demonically grotesque subjects or bizarre diagrams of various magical symbols. Above all, a sweet, poisonous smell filled the room, profoundly assaulting the eyes and noses of those who entered it for the first time. Eventually, it must make a person go numb and lose their grip on reality. Inside that study, Genji prepared Kinzo's usual drink as well as a well-trained. No one would ever think of drinking such an ominous dark green liquid in that complex and ornate glass unless someone first told them it was alcohol. Poured it into a little glass. Then he placed the cube of sugar in a strangely shaped spoon, poured water from a pitcher. Strangely, when the transparent water was poured, the dark green liquid turned cloudy white. It was a strange optical illusion, as though the water had caused a chemical reaction, and made the drink become even more unrecognizable as liquor. Then Genji added original flavors and Kinzo loved, fine-tuning his taste. There was no recipe. Success only measured by one of Kinzo's mood swings. It had taken Genji many decades to get right. Genji placed the glass on top of the tray. By this time, Kinzo was gazing out.
どうぞ、親方様。
ああ、すまん。
Kinzo had regained his composure and was now unrecognizable as the shouting, screaming, yelling man from the hotel. Looking at this man from behind as he tilted the glass and gazed down the scenery below the window, projected a sense of dignity. To allow Kinzo to set his glass down at any time, Genji motionlessly waited behind Kinzo to his left, as though he was living beside him. Then, without averting his eyes from the window, Kinzo held out his glass. It was only a mouthful remaining. It was not a gesture intended to set up upon the tray, but a motion to hand the glass over to Genji.
飲め、我が友よ。
もったいないお言葉です。
私とお前の中に儀礼はいらぬ。飲め、友よ。
いただきます。
Genji respectfully received the glass and inclined it a little to taste its contents. After that, he gulped it down.
お前が作るのを真似ているのだがどうにも同じ味が出ぬ。お前が作る方がうまい。
ありがとうございます。親方様のご指導の賜物です。
So smiled as the loyal subject who refused to put aside drinking. However, he was not making fun of him. His smile was relaxed as though chuckling at both friends' old, unshakable habit.
互いに老いたな。年を数えることも忘れてすでに久しい。
今日まで過ごすことをお許しいただけたのも、すべて親方様のおかげでございます。
Kinzo gave a faint smile, as if to say he didn't need any flattery.
今日まで本当によく私に仕えてくれた。息子たちは誰もが私を変人呼ばわりした。大勢いた使用人も皆私を恐れてやめていった。お前だけが今でも私に仕えてくれる。
もったいないお言葉です。
私の余命もそう長くはあるまい。息子たちは私の遺産がいつ転がり込んでくるかをうろうろ待つハゲタカばかりだ。クラウスの愚か者は金を湯水のように使い、1枚の金貨を売るのに2枚の金貨をそれで金を稼げたなどと妄言を。 エヴァは金の亡者だ。あやつは私を鶏か何かだと思っておる。死んだらガラにして出汁まで取る気だ。ルドルフの間抜けは女遊びばかり。ローザはどこの馬の骨ともわからん男の赤ん坊など産みおって、ジェシカは無能で無学だ。ジョージには男としての器がない。バトラーは後宮家の栄誉を自ら、マリアなど見るのも汚らわしい。なぜだ、なぜに後宮の血はこうも無能なのか。私の築き上げた栄光を受け継ぐにふさわしい者はおらんのか。ああ、分かっておるとも。これがベアトリーチェの呪いであることも分かっておる。黄金の魔女め、それが私への復讐のつもりか。憎みたくば憎むがよい。逃げたければ逃げるがよい。逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬ、逃がさぬわ。お前は私のものだ。常に私の腕の中でなくてはならん。私の生涯のすべてなのだ。我が鳥かごにて永遠に私だけにささやき続けるのだ。ベアトリーチェ、なぜに微笑み返してはくれぬ。ベアトリーチェ。すまぬ我が友よ。
When his seemingly deranged fits subsided, Kinzo regained his memory. It's like seeing two different people, wild Kinzo and a composed Kinzo, living together in one body.
故に私は決心した。このままぼやききった余生を怠慢に過ごすことなどもはや耐えられはせん。この身に最後にとするコインがあるならば、それを悪魔たちのルーレットに託してみたい。魔法の力はいつもかけるリスクで決まる。日本古来の呪術である牛の国参りがそうであろう。7日間儀式を目撃されてはならないという困難なリスクが生じれば生じるほどに魔力は強く生じるのだ。神話に登場する数々の奇跡は天文学的リスクに奇跡的な低確率を得て成就した驚愕すべき魔力の結晶なのだと言える。モーゼが海を割ったのは神の奇跡ではない。蹂躙の計りに乗せられ軍勢によって航海に追い詰められた絶体絶命のリスクが奇跡の魔力を生んだのだ。同じことが同じ規模で繰り返されようとも再び海が割れることはないだろう。なぜならモーゼは力ある者たちのルーレットの麻生木ナユタをかけたよりも多く存在する目の中に一つだけ刻まれた奇跡を見事引き寄せることができたからだ。その天文学的確率に勝利できる力、そう、奇跡をつかみ取る運気はすなわち魔力なのだ。強大な魔力を得るためには絶望的なリスクを背負わねばならぬ。魔力もたぬ者はそれを賭けでなく自暴自棄と呼ぼう。しかし真に魔力ある者はその奇跡をつかみ取り神秘を成就させるのだ。もしも私にその魔力があるならば、 私はその奇跡をつかみ取るだろう。生涯を費やした願いを実現できるだろう。
Enzo looked out to the sky. Looked up to the sky outside the window. Separated his arms as if appealing to someone up in the sky.
もし私にその奇跡を手にする資格があったなら、おー、ベアトリーチェ、ベアトリーチェ、お前の愛くるしい笑顔をもう一度だけ見せてくれ。どれほどの月日を経ようともお前の面影が消えることはない。ただお前の美少が見たい。それ、お前から授かったものを全て返そう。あの日からの栄光を全てお前に返そう。富も名誉も黄金もいらぬ。お前に授かった私はただお前の美少五将だ。ベアトリーチェ。
Nonsensical yells became a scream. Enzo slumped to the floor, tearing at it with both hands. Genji had no choice but to wordlessly watch over his master.
やあ諸君、